Okay. Just
Lovely.
done that.
Cool, thank you. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending our support workshop for FlexiJob agencies. Happy Leap Year Day as well. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is just your welcome. So if you've got any questions or comments, please raise your hand during the question and answer session. We'll probably take questions after each section. Any slides and the related documents we'll share with you following the workshop, probably by next week. And again, we'd like to record today's session just for the use of the organisations who are unable to attend, and if you want to share with any of your colleagues. Okay, next slide, please. So just welcome and introductions. So my name is Lara Allen. I'm the Senior Project Manager for FlexiJob Agencies. And then on my team today, we've got Michelle, we've got Jamie, we've got Joe, and we have a guest speaker who's John. And we also have Clare as well from SWAC. So for the agenda, we're going to go with our working with providers, which John's going to do. Then we're going to go to provider partnerships. Provider partnerships. And then we can take questions after that. Then our account managers, Jamie, Michelle, Joe, are going to go through data quality and the quality framework. Vic is on the call as well. She's going to take us through our SME apprenticeship brokerage projects. And then we'll have an open discussion and a more general question and answer. Then next steps and close. I'm just going to pass over to Jamie.
It does. Suppose my
Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, so this is the thing.
Can I just ask if you've got your microphone on, you could put it on mute during the presentation, so be grateful for that. Thanks. Good morning, everyone. And just to introduce the session that John and Claire have kindly agreed to do for us, we thought we'd give you a bit of background as to why we've arranged that today. Often Michelle, Joe, myself, and previously Vic, who's also on this call, are notified from our FlexiJob apprenticeship agencies where there are issues with providers, and I've listed some of the reasons that we often get contact around provider issues on the slide there in the first bullet point. I'm sure there are more that you could tell me about, and I know that a lot of the agencies we work with don't ever have any issues with working with their providers, and they have really successful partnerships. But we thought this workshop would usefully address some of the issues that have come up recently in terms of how we are able to deal with any of those issues, what scope we have, which is relatively limited in terms of our relationship with providers because we don't actually connect to them. So John, who's on the call, is part of our market oversight team, and he's going to tell you what his role is within DFE and his team's role in terms of that liaison with providers. We've made much better relationships with internal colleagues recently, so we can look at things like where issues arise around provider closures. And we have dealt with some of those issues directly with our agencies and tried to support agencies in recent months. We asked you a little while ago if you could send us a list of all of the providers that you were working with at that point in time, and we'll aim to be in touch with you in the coming weeks to refresh that list, just so that we've got an up-to-date idea of the range of providers you're working with, and so we can, for example, cross-reference that against any provider notifications around closures that we might get. So yeah, this session is really about aiming to give you a DFE and one of our FlexiJob agencies, Southwest Apprenticeship Company's perspective on working with providers. So I'll let John take us through that. There'll be an opportunity to ask John questions at the end of his session, as there will with Claire at the end of her session. So next slide, please, John. Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you. A bit about me. I lead a small team in IMOD who have oversight of around 300 small ITPs in the London and South East region, and there are two other similar sized teams who cover the central and southwest patch, and a third with responsibility for the north of the country. So I'm just going to talk through a few slides which will give you a flavour of how we engage and monitor providers of various funding values who contract with the DFE, delivering apprenticeships and other funding lines. Can we move on to slide 2, please? So a bit of background. In October last year, we reorganised the department's FE regional teams to provide a more consistent and specialist end-to-end provider contract management approach. So under the previous model, all provider types were managed by single case managers. So you'd have one caseload manager who would have responsibility and relationships with colleges, ITPs, local authorities, etc. So under the new model, we split into 2 teams. So we've got place-based teams who have oversight of the colleges, local authorities, which I'll touch on later, and the newly created IMOD, Independent Market Oversight Division, who oversee the 1,100 plus independent and non-college based providers, ITPs, HEIs, MATs, who are active in the FE market. So there are currently around 1,160 active providers who we manage, and they're delivering to 382,000 learners. So in terms of funding, that equates to over 700 million, and the majority of that, 75% of which relates to apprenticeships, with a smaller proportion in other funding lines, like 16 to 19 study programme, AEB, to a lesser extent. So our job is to monitor the role these providers play in delivering our priority programmes, primarily apprenticeships, but also boot camps, HDQs and T-levels, so we can better understand issues, local barriers that we can help address. And we have regular conversations with the largest providers and lighter touch engagement with the smaller ones. And we use our normal contract management levers and relationships to try and maintain that high quality provision and experience for learners, choice for employers, and we also support learners and employers to continue and complete programs when ITPs fail or choose to exit the market. Next slide, please. So in IMOD, we use the following key indicators to manage the cohort and maintain a high quality provider base. So we'll look at quality, where we'll intervene when quality standards are not met, and we obviously use Ofsted, apprenticeship accountability framework and quality achievement rates to do that. We will look at the financial oversight of the provider base, intervene where risks have been identified to reduce the impact of provider failure, and primarily we do that through assessment of the annual statement of accounts, our annual financial health assessment process. And we also work with other functions across the DFE, audit, investigations, contracts and payments teams when there's a breach of contract, and we'll take a range of actions there where necessary to ensure we're getting value for money for the public purse. And we also work directly with ITPs to ensure that their delivery strategy is aligned with our policy and priorities. We'll look at the ownership structures and governance arrangements of ITPs, and we'll take action to mitigate against risks where contractual levers support us to do that. We'll robustly assess new providers and support them with the onboarding process, and we also manage complaints and look at safeguarding issues. Next slide, please. So IMOD is split into 4 teams, 3 of which engage with the providers of differing funding values, and then there's a market change team who specifically manage the exit of providers when that comes to pass. So the medium and larger provider teams monitor the performance of the ITPs and HEIs with a funding value of over 2 million. And all those providers will engage with a 3 termly conversations a year, plus 1 annual strategic conversation. And that gives us the opportunity to identify get early sight of the risk of underperformance and failure, so we can respond quickly to protect the interests of the learners and employers. The level and nature of the intervention that we can take varies, driven by level of risk and contribution, and that can range from providing support and challenge right through to in some cases a managed route to exit the market. And the team use intelligence gathered to work closely with policy leads and the DfE in the department, and business delivery partners and other regulators to refine the oversight arrangements and maintain those conditions so we can improve the contribution from the ITP sector. Next slide, please. So that's so those are the 2 larger teams, and then there's the contract delivery and insight team, CDI team, which is the one I work in. So across the country, we have oversight of approximately 900 smaller providers, and those are the ones that have got contract values of less than 2 million. And due to the volume of those providers, the 900 in this cohort, resource doesn't allow us to have the same level of direct engagement with providers as the larger and medium teams do. So we use a dynamic sort of task-based model relating to our core business activities. So we'll target high-risk providers for direct engagement, and we'll support the resolution of complex queries through our query management system, which providers use to route their questions and issues to us. But also, we are currently stepping up our level of direct engagement. So we're more proactive as can be. And it's our intention to engage with all the providers each year at some point to determine risk and ensure delivery of the contractual obligations for learners, intervening where necessary. Next slide, please. And then the fourth team in IMOD is the market change team, and they have responsibility for managing the market exit of ITPs as well as assessing change of control requests. So when a provider does exit the market, the objective is to minimise any negative impact on apprentices, employers, and other stakeholders, and the team will source and secure alternative high quality provision for those displaced apprentices, and they also will manage the risk to the public purse from loss of learner evidence, over underpayments, lack of apprenticeship learner progress, etc. And they also assess requests for change of control where there's been a change or appointment of new directors at organisations, for example, and ensure that they are compliant with our contract and funding rules. So in terms of just a bit of the current picture in terms of what the market change team have got on their books at the moment, they're currently working through 59 live termination cases and we're finding that the majority are as a result of voluntary exit at the provider's request. But there are, of course, a cohort who are providers who aren't financially viable, and they've not met the required threshold for our financial health, or they've had an inadequate Ofsted outcome. So there's always quite a high number of exits in the market which take up a lot of time. And next slide, please. And I mentioned at the beginning that we'd split into place-based teams and ITPs. So I'll just touch on the role of the place-based teams. Obviously, they work directly with the FE colleges and specialist colleges, as well as local authorities, to secure the delivery of national priorities, and they provide proactive support and challenge where necessary, intervene as we do to secure financial quality. And they also have the relationships with MCAs, ERBs, to support our FE reform and working on LSIPs and such like. They also have annual strategic conversations and termly conversations with the providers to support to ensure that the priority programs are being delivered. So, as a brief outline of our model, how we engage and monitor our providers, I can take any questions. There's also you can contact me directly or through the team as well. I'm happy to follow up with anything outside of the meeting as well.
That's really helpful, John. Thank you. Joe, if you'd put the next slide up, I think John's contact details might be on the one to follow. There we go.
Yeah.
Or the team's contact details are there, John. Is that right? Yeah. That's
a generic email address. Yeah, which is monitored and queries routed to the team.
Thanks so much, John. I feel like I've learned a lot in the last few minutes there, so I really appreciate that. Hopefully our colleagues on the call also feel the same. But as John said, there's opportunity for any questions or any queries you've got about the model that John's described and the role of the IMOD colleagues. Does anybody would either like to put something in the chat function as a question, or maybe raise your hand and we can take any questions?
I think Claire's got her hand up, Jamie. If you want to come in, Claire.
Thank you.
Please.
Hi, I just had a quick question. I was going to briefly mention in my presentation, but when a provider goes into administration and we have to swap apprentices, and I have actually asked the team that you've been talking about, but if they've taken funding from our account after they'd gone into administration, but we were told not to close the apprentice down on the apprenticeship account because we'd had the letter to say that they were going into administration, but they hadn't closed the doors at that point. And after that date, they took a payment. Now, we need that payment back to give to the new provider. And you said that there is, as part of what the team does, is that they look after where perhaps there's been an overpayment to the provider. Is that possible? Do you think we'll ever get that money back to give to the new provider to carry on the training?
I think it is possible. I think it's difficult when providers go into liquidation, and it often is quite a long process to get to the end. And I think I'm right in saying, in my experience of that because they're in liquidation, there aren't usually many funds available, and the DFE will join the list of creditors that are owed money. So it is possible, but I think it's quite a protracted process. But I'm happy to pick that up in a bit more get a bit more detail on that with market change colleagues. But yeah,
Yeah,
in
no,
my
thank you.
experience, the DFE has had to join the queue, so to speak, as it's, you know, along with other people that might be owed any money or funding due to the liquidation.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that, John. I can't see everybody on my screen, so if anybody else has got their hand up to ask a question of John or wants to put anything in the chat function, I can't see anything in there yet. Any more questions for John before? Oh, there's another hand up I can see. Is that you, Julie? Yeah, if you'd like to ask John.
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
Morning.
One issue that we've had is with one particular training provider is getting the incentives from them. If they were 18 or under, and they get the 2 lots of £500 training incentive. With most training providers, it just comes straight across and it's not a problem. With this particular one, they asked us to invoice them, which is something we've never experienced before. We did invoice them, and then we still didn't get it, no matter how long. In the second incentives were due, we still not had the first one. So in the end, we ended up taking them to small claims court. You know, I think they're just hoping that we'd just forget about it. But we're a not-for-profit organisation, so these things are quite important to us. But I just wondered if there was any, if by contacting you, there was any, you know, use in doing that. Would you be able to support us with this?
Yeah, by all means, Julie. Yeah. Did you have any input from colleagues on the apprenticeship service at the time with this particular?
Did raise it as an issue. They said they were limited in what they could do and what support they could give. But I was just wondering if, with you working in a different department, if that might be something that we raised with you instead.
Yeah, by all means, you can raise it with us. Yeah, and we can put pressure on.
Brilliant, thank you.
And John, that would be through the address that's on screen there, sort of generic contact. Yeah. Good. Okay, Julie, I think that's helpful. Hopefully it's not something you have to keep pursuing, but yeah. Are there any more questions for John this morning? Okay, I'm going to take that silence as golden, if that's okay with everyone. And John, would just like to thank you again for joining us this morning and giving us that overview. And thanks for the email address if anyone's got any follow-ups. Appreciate it.
Okay, welcome.
Okay, colleagues, we're going to move on to hear from Clare, who, as you can see, works with Southwest Apprenticeship Company, SWAC. Clare is just going to give us an overview of how they deliver their provider partnership work, which obviously is just one model among many and one sort of context among many, but we thought it'd be useful to hear from one of our agencies just to kind of, you know, sort of maybe assist other people if they're looking at how those models are being built or they're having any issues at the moment. And just really good to share some information between the agencies on a session like this. So over to you, Clare.
Hi, thank you. So I'm Clare Vertigen. I'm the Managing Director of the Southwest Apprenticeship Company, which is a bit of a mouthful, so everybody calls it SWAC. And just to give you a bit of context behind it, we were one of the very first ATAs, apprenticeship training agencies, that we bid for funding from the government back in 2009, became an ATA in 2010, employed our first apprentice 2011, or 2010, sorry. We became a limited company in 2011 and stopped being a project, so we became a commercial entity. Last year we joined the FlexU Job Agency Register, So I know that everybody on this call will be at different stages. I've spotted Jackie. Hi, Jackie. Not seen you in a while. You're from the old ATA model as well. Some of you will have relationships with providers. So, and some of you might not have great relationships or are wondering how to build on them. So next slide, please. I thought back to how it was when we first started. We did an awful lot of work and we went to see all the FE colleges and some of the specialist training providers in the Southwest when we started. It was really difficult in those early days. Nobody knew what we were. They didn't really trust us. They thought we were competition. They thought, what could you possibly add to what we do, etc. And it's taken quite some time to build up those relationships, to the point where we get providers coming to us now to say, can we become one of your authorised providers, please? Can you put us on our website? Can we work with you on campaigns, etc. So I thought about what it was that changed and how we sold what we did with providers. So the main reason why our providers use us is because we remove barriers for SMEs. They have companies that they work with, whether they're small companies, one-man bands, that say, I don't want to take on an apprentice. I haven't got recruitment. I haven't got HR manager. The paperwork's too much. I don't understand the funding. And we can really support those small companies to go through this because we look after everything. Because of the service we have in place, our completion rates are much higher than normal, and like one of our KPIs is with regarding apprentices progressing or being employed by the host on completion, and 98% of our apprentices are. And I think that's because of the way that we work really well with the employer. We have a robust recruitment process, etc. So we give that time back to the provider to get on with delivering, and we look after the difficult stuff that happens. Joint marketing campaigns. I have joint marketing campaigns, joint literature with our providers. I met a new provider in Merseyside, which I know is outside our area, but we do have a cohort over there. Met with a new provider and we're doing joint paperwork there to explain what it is they do and what we do. When it comes to employer events, we support the local colleges, providers, etc. with that. During National Apprenticeship Week, we were here, there and everywhere. Ellie, who is our account manager, she went to Hartbury College. She was in university, did a big talk with their students around agriculture apprentices. I was at the University of Gloucestershire on an employer panel talking about what we do and about apprenticeships with smaller organisations, etc. We've run workshops with colleges, with providers on best practice for employing, how to mentor apprentice and things like that. So we can really add to their offer, and by doing that we have grown, and we now have our providers coming to us and saying, can we work together on these kind of things, on joint projects? Next slide, please. So then where to start? So we had a new provider a few months ago came to us and said, we really want to work with you. We do our due diligence first. So before we do anything, we look at what they deliver, what their offer is. Always read their Ofsted, look at apprenticeship feedback, employer feedback. Next slide, please. We meet with them like I did last week, introduced what it is we do. Some of them really, they think they know what we do and they think they know the offer, but they don't get it. They haven't read the funding rules around it. So, I explain that to them, discuss what we do. And I'm always very interested to not only know what they do, but what their endpoint assessment process is like, etc. Next slide, please. What we do next is, and I've sent over to this new provider, is our service level agreement. We developed this a long time ago with support from a legal team. But it basically, it's like we have a host handbook, we have an apprentice handbook. This is like what we call our provider handbook. So it's got all our contact details in there, who we agree who the contract managers are going to be. We've got the terms and conditions in there. So health and safety, really important to us. We're the employer. We need to make sure that we've got everything in place to make sure the apprentice is safe. Indemnity insurance, termination of service, I'll come back to that in a second. Confidentiality, GRDP, DBS checks, etc. Termination of services is a really important one, and we do have a section. Yes, of course, they can decide to terminate working with us, but that is there for us because if we feel that the quality of the delivery for us as we're the client, as the employer, and for our apprentice isn't of the highest standard, then we can terminate that contract and look for an alternative provider. We've actually only ever done it once, mostly if there's a complaint about the assessor or the provider in general. It could be that there's a clash of personalities. We'll ask if we can move assessor, etc. But in one instance, it did come to the fact that the delivery was becoming increasingly poor. The feedback was increasingly poor. So we moved our apprentices over to a different provider, and actually that provider went on to get an Ofsted grade 4. So, we could actually see it coming with the quality that they were delivering. Next slide, please. So just in there as well, as I said, it was kind of like a handbook that we put together. We outline our service. We go through exactly how we recruit, how we, the apprentice journey that's within there, because we each one of our apprentices has a mentor, how often we visit, what we discuss, etc. But when we talk about, when we're in there, we're also talking to the employers about apprenticeships in general and upskilling. So we refer back to our provider to say somebody in there wants to do a HR level 5, say. We do specialist recruitment. So for some of our larger organisations, we have a recruitment only model. So we recruit for them on large scale. Now, next bit there is really important, and it was covered by one of the questions earlier about the incentive and things. So the apprenticeship funding rules are in there. It says exactly from verbatim from the funding rules what they need to do with us as an FJAA, including what they need to put in the ILR, where it needs to be recorded, and etc., so that our DAS account and everything is set up correctly. We also send them a start email when the apprentice starts that repeats it and says it to them. And I tell you, over the years, we've been told by the Department of Education, but you don't have as many apprentices on programme as we can see. And that is because the provider hasn't done it correctly. We tell them how to do it, and we bang that door, and we bang that drum, sorry, should I say. But they need to do that. We need to make sure it's correct, because if they don't do it correct, we don't get our incentive payment. Whether you pass that incentive payment on to the host employer, whether you keep it, they need to make sure the ILR is correct, otherwise you won't get it. We have had it in the past when that's when we found out that's where they've done it wrong, because they put the host on there and they've sent it directly to the host. Next slide, please. So again, I think I touched on it earlier, we're the client, we're the customer to the training provider. So it's really important for us for them to know what we want them to do and what we require for our apprentices and for our hosts, as we are the official employer. So we want copies of all the paperwork. At start, we want details of all the assessor and tutors. We want access to the online portfolios. I've got one client that I work with, is a larger client that I manage, and each month I go onto the online portfolio, I check where the apprentices are, I check to make sure they've submitted their work, give a report back to the host, etc. But those regular updates from the assessor are really important. It helps us to not only to be able to talk about progression, how well they're doing, celebrate their success, etc., and help them to implement what they're working on within the workplace. But it helps us to know about barriers to learning. Have they had an accident at college? Have they not turned up to college? Has the college put them on a personal development performance plan because they're being constantly late? Those are the things that we need to know about. We're the employer. If it's not dealt with immediately and it gets out of control, then that affects the service that we provide to our host employers. Those regular updates, we need to know where they're getting to, how close are they to Gateway. When they get to Gateway, that's where we need to be sitting down with our host employers. We sit down and we talk about what happens next. Are they going to progress on to the next level of an apprenticeship? Are they going to complete and be employed by the host? Or have they got no job at all? In which case we need to do some extra information, advice and guidance with that apprentice so that they've got their CV ready and they're looking for other jobs. So when they complete, our KPI is still good. Obviously, copies of all certificates, etc. as well. Next slide, please, because we are the employer. Those are my contact details, but just before I go on to any questions, I did cover, so we had two other points. Was that one of our providers went into administration last year. Now, this has never ever happened to us. We've never had a provider disappear like that. We didn't know what to do. We went to our contract manager, to Victoria, sorry, and said, you know, help. We did take it into our own hands because the process wasn't moving as quickly as we needed it to for our apprentices because they were close to completion. So looking for a new provider, I did it the same way I would do if an employer came to me and said that I want, I don't know, a digital learner level 5. I didn't know who delivered it. Is I go and have a look at the government's website, shortlist some providers, do my due diligence first of all. Ofsted, you know, I like to see what the feedback was, and then contact them and decide who we're going to move over. It was very traumatic for the apprentices and for the hosts, and we're still going through that at the moment, but it's just something to be aware of because it had never happened to us before. But just to, I suppose, to summarise at the end is that if you get your provider relationships and collaboration correct, you know, right, and you work with them, you know, we work really closely with Gloucestershire College, with City of Bristol, Western, South Gloucestershire, Petrock. Like, there's only one college in the southwest that we've never worked with and we've never put a start with. Everybody else we work with, we've worked with them on special projects over the years, whether that was, you know, encouraging, I live in the Forest of Dean, encouraging apprentices to go into tourism and destination apprenticeships and working with them so that they moved around different host organisations, working with LSIP in our area in sectors that have been identified as having skills gaps and apprenticeships could add. So being part of that sort of like conversation and working closely with our providers. And yeah, things are much better than they were back in 2010 and everybody said no. Thank you. Any questions? And that's my contact details.
Thank you, Claire. I can already see one hand up from Holly, so we'll go straight to questions for Claire, but hopefully people found that really useful as I did. And thanks again to Claire. Holly.
Thanks, Jamie. Hi, Claire.
Hi.
You've spoken to my colleague Deb because we went through that experience together that you just mentioned, because I'm from Apprenticeship Solutions.
Oh, yes.
So yeah. I was just wondering, because it just sounds like such a good quality service that you're providing for your apprentices, and I was just interested. We are able to do that because we have a really small number of providers that we work with, but it sounds like you work with lots and lots of different providers. So I was just wondering what the ratio was of how many providers, how many apprentices, and then how you sort of staff that to get it to a point where it works effectively and you can do the high quality when you're having to have so many conversations with so many different people.
Yeah, I suppose because of the amount of time that we've been around, so we've employed well over 1,000 apprentices since we became a limited company, which actually isn't huge compared to some of the ATAs that were around before. And so we are still an SME ourselves. We employ between 80 and 120 apprentices, and that's as much as we can do really to with the amount of staffing that we have. But we do have close relationships. There's only 4 of us, Holly. That's us, that's SWAC. There's me, there's Shelley, who's the ops manager, there's Ellie, and there's Shola, who's the mentor. And we work really well with our providers, and the business development team know us, and you know it's because we've worked with them for so long and we know them all really well, if you know what I mean. So, you know, at City Bristol College, I have meetings with that team every month. SGS, I'm in seeing them. Gloucestershire College, our head office is within Gloucestershire College. We rent some space from them, etc. You know, we're really close to their team. So it's just the way that it's evolved over the years.
And
It's,
because you cover all sectors, Claire, do you literally sometimes have all of your 80 apprentices could be doing a totally different apprenticeship and have a different skills coach? Because that's the other thing as well, is we maybe only have 2 or 3 skills coaches, so that gathering of information is much easier.
yeah, no, so we have our apprentices, most of them are doing we've got engineering. We have covered everything, if I'm honest, and people do come to us, and we tend to we rely on our providers to be able to have the specialisms in those areas, whereas we are much more our mentors work with the apprentice in a much more we're working like you would do with a member of staff, except like, so it's not necessarily about the specialism and knowing what the subject is, because we rely on our provider to be able to do that, whereas we work with the apprentice to make them, do they understand what their objectives are, do they understand what's in their job description, do they understand the work that they've been set, talking through, getting them to talk about what projects they've been set, or what assignments they've been set, what units they're working on. For engineering, we work really closely with our engineering apprentices, and I work with quite a lot with that sector. But the best person for them to talk to if it's a technical issue is either their manager, their line manager, or with their training provider themselves, because they're the specialists. We're there to make sure that everything else is running smoothly, and we'd obviously deal with all the performance issues, etc., like a HR manager would do.
Thank you, it's really interesting.
Yeah, I know, I think we've just all got different models, haven't we?
Overlappingly different models. Yeah. Are there any more questions for Claire at this point? That's what you get when you do a nice clear presentation, Claire. You don't get any questions.
Good.
I'd just like to thank Claire and John again for this part of the session this morning about working with providers. As I said, it's something we've wanted to do for a little while because of the amount of issues we get raised during our discussions with you as agencies. So thanks again, and we're going to move on, and Michelle's going to take us through. If Joe, you could go on to the next slide, thanks. We've got a few slides really just around data quality and the implementation of our quality framework, and Michelle's going to lead through that. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Jamie. Hi everyone. As Jamie's mentioned, I'm Michelle Drummond, one of the account managers for the FlexiJob apprenticeship agencies. And this is just to give you a brief update really on the work we're doing on data quality and the quality framework. So the first thing is just a general plea really for you to continue to engage with us with your data collection forms. As you obviously will recall from previous communications from us, we are aiming to phase these out by May. We're doing a data transition period at the moment where we are quality testing the data that we are getting through by default through the apprenticeship service and the ILR data feeds. So we'd love it if you would continue to use the refreshed DCFs that we sent out last month until further notice. And also, if you can, include narrative details where appropriate. So that's the place to flag any issues, challenges, barriers, or successes that you wish to report by exception to us. If you can, please remember to submit these by the 5th working day of each month via Galaxy Key. So therefore your February data return is going to be due by the 7th of March. Next slide, please, Joe. With regards to the data quality work we've been doing, thank you so much for the agencies where we've asked them to provide us a list of learner ULNs so we can cross-reference the data we have from your DCF with what we are getting through the data feeds. Another plea with your DCF returns is for you to only report information on there if it's actually been updated on your ES account. So for example, if you're recording starts, withdrawals, any breaks in learning or achievements on your DCF, they should be shown on your apprenticeship service account. So I'd appreciate it if you don't record things on your DCF unless they're on the apprenticeship service, because that throws some anomalies to us. And also to echo what Claire mentioned in her presentation, please ensure you select the FJAA delivery model and that your providers are coding the apprentices correctly and in a timely manner, so as soon as possible. Next slide, please, Joe. The code that they need to use is LDM 386, and that must go in the learning delivery farm fields against all aims delivered as part of the apprenticeship, where the apprenticeship obviously is directly employed by the agency. If this coding isn't done correctly, basically we don't see that learner come through as a flexi job apprenticeship. So it's really important that that is done correctly, and obviously it's important for you if you want to be paid incentives and that sort of thing. With regards to recording the employer number, that must be the agency number in the field and not the host employer, which I think Claire mentioned also in her presentation. So that's just another thing to be mindful of. Next slide, please, Joe. With regards to the quality framework implementation, obviously we involved you in the consultation last year, and we've come up with the indicators that we're going to benchmark agencies against. So throughout March, we're going to be going through a process of looking at this data for the first time. So as a result of this piece of work, we may be in touch with you to follow up any performance discussions with a view to looking at indicators where we may need to discuss these with you and get a bit more contextual information from you. And basically that part of this process is allowing us to test the data validity with the feeds that we've got coming through and help support you to address any performance concerns. Next slide, please. If you've got any questions about any of this, please contact either Jamie, myself, or Joe, and we'll be happy to help you. But that's it in terms of this update from me. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Victoria Dixon, who is going to give you an overview of the SME Apprenticeships Brokerage service. So over to you, Vic. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Great to be here. Yeah, so I'm here today to talk about a support service that we have had running since September 2002 to understand SME engagement in apprenticeships and also to boost starts. If we can just move on to the next slide, please, Joe. So the reason that I'm here talking to you is twofold. One, due to the model that we have introduced for our brokerage service, which I'll come on to in a moment, awareness of the support that's available for SMEs is really low. So I've been speaking to everybody that we hold a relationship with as a department to raise awareness of the service. So that is one of the reasons. And another is a lot of our brokers are engaging with SMEs who cannot recruit an apprentice because they can't commit to the full duration or need some more support. And the answer to a lot of the challenges that SMEs are telling us at the moment is our FlexiJob agency model. So I'm having a very similar conversation with the brokers at the moment to raise awareness of FlexiJob agencies. So really wanted to ensure that you were aware of the service because some of our brokers may be reaching out to you. So we are describing the service at the moment as a pathfinder, and therefore it does have limited coverage. And this is one of the reasons why we believe that we need to promote the service, because it is limited. It's not a national offer. We haven't been able to do any big national campaigns. So the service offers support for employers in adult social care, manufacturing, construction to recruit any apprentice. So it could be somebody in manufacturing looking to take on a business admin role, and also covers the digital sector. But this is where the offer is to any SME, no matter what their sector. As an employer, they need to be looking to recruit somebody within a digital role. So those are our priority sectors, and they were selected because they were areas where we felt growth was needed post-pandemic. And the service is mainly operated in the north. So we've got 4 brokers covering each of those regions that are on screen now. And as I say, this service is really to understand how to engage SMEs, to understand the challenges they're facing, and to also hopefully support them to recruit their first apprentice. If we can just move on to the next slide, please, Jo. So in terms of other eligibility criteria, the SMEs we're working with need to have not had an apprentice start within the last 2 years and also need to have been trading for 12 months. I will share the slides with you afterwards, along with some collateral for each of our brokers and a link to a web page which will have more information on. But you can see on screen that in terms of priority regions, we have gone down to local authority level. And this is because our work is to support the levelling up agenda within the regions, and these are areas where we feel there is growth available from SMEs. If we can just go on to the next slide. So this is who we're working with. You may be aware of these organisations already. So these are our 4 brokers. We've got the Institute for Public Policy Research, IPPR, operating in Merseyside and the North West. And then we have 2 learning provider networks covering Greater Manchester and Yorkshire. And then we're also working with New College Durham, who are a provider themselves, and they're operating our service in the North East. So I'll pop the contact details for each of the brokers on screen. They are really keen to hear from FlexiJob agencies that cover their regions and are able to enhance the conversations they're having with SMEs. What they're really keen to understand is if they have an SME that is not able to commit to an apprenticeship, need more support, really interested in the FlexiJob model, they want to understand where in practice there is available delivery partners within yourselves. So if you think that you could, offer support to these sectors, offer support to the regions, then do get in touch with our brokers, because yes, they'll have the information that's available on .gov, but I'm sure they would love to be armed with more information about the offer, about support, so that when they're having onboarding conversations with small employers, they can really push your offer and again, try and get the start from the SME that hasn't previously engaged. So in addition to those asks, if we can just move on to the final slide. We are looking where possible to promote this support. So if you are part of networks, if you do have, you're part of, SME supply chain groups, any ERB bodies, then do help us to raise awareness of Brokerage, because we do want to support as many SMEs as possible. At the moment, the support is available until September 2024. So we do want to make sure we maximise this support before we go away and consider the longer term approach we take to supporting SMEs. So yeah, just a quick update from me, but hopefully it's helpful. And if you can support, if you do want to get in touch with one of the brokers, feel free to reach out to them. They will be really willing to have a conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. That was really good of you to join us this morning and to give us that information. I think we've got quite a few of our FlexiJob agencies who are part of ambassador networks, apprenticeship ambassador networks, and I know that you've given a presentation to that network. But just with that ask there that Vic said at the end of her presentation, any support you're able to give us with this and raising awareness is greatly appreciated. Have you got any questions for Vic? Anybody, particularly around SME brokerage, or possibly questions around the short session we did on quality and the quality framework that Michelle just did previously? Just please put a question in chat or raise your hand if there are any questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Is anybody else spotting anything?
No, there's nothing in the chat. Okay,
well, I'm guessing that people may be eager for a quick cup of tea before their next appointment at 11 o'clock or similar. So unless there's anything else, we'll just kind of close the session with a little date for your diary there. We propose that we'll do another one of these support sessions when hopefully we can cover a couple of topics as we've done this morning, which will be useful to you and your FlexiJob agency and the development of the agencies. I've got one scheduled for Thursday, September the 26th. If you want to pencil that in your calendars, Joe or one of us will be sending out a meeting invitation in due course. We can run other sessions and we can be responsive to requests and specific topics. I've spoken to a couple of agency contacts lately that said they were keen to send me a few ideas around and send Michelle a few ideas around ideas for workshops and things that we could cover. So please get in touch with Joe, Michelle, or myself if you want to do that. Okay, so just want to say really thank you to everybody for contributing this morning. Thank you for your participation and for your time, and hope you have a great rest of the week and a good weekend when it gets here. Okay, all the best and see you soon.
Thanks, Jamie.
Take care. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Do you want to stay on the call, team mates? Thanks, Vic. That was great.
No.